for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy isn't doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.
Hello, Scooby Doo fans! Welcome to my Season 2 Episode 7 review of the Scooby Doo Show. So last time I continued my 2025 summer special with a review of Season 2 Episode 6 of the Scooby Doo Show. I hope you guys enjoyed that. But of course today, I'll be covering Season 2 Episode 7 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled Creepy Cruise, which was released on October 22nd, 1977. The short synopsis of the episode is, after winning a contest, the whole gang go on a vacation cruise. On board the ship is a rather nice professor, along with some investors of his who are interested in his time machine. Testing out his time machine for his investors, the professor accidentally unleashes a monster from 5,000 years in the future into the modern world. Trapped on the boat, the gang has nothing else to do but return the mean monster to the future. So normally I would tell you guys what DVD I'm watching Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show on. However, sadly, Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show has yet to get any sort of physical media release. Like I said in previous reviews, I wish it did. I wish they would create a whole complete series box set of the Scooby Doo Show. But alas, it has yet to happen. So, like I've done in previous reviews, and for the purposes of this review, I'll be watching this episode on HBO Max, which is my recommended streaming service on where you guys should view this, as it's the only show besides Scooby-Doo Rory and What's New Scooby-Doo that is still up on HBO Max. For some reason, HBO Max thought it was a good idea to take all the Scooby content down, which sucks. But thankfully, Season 2 of the Scooby Doo Show is still intact and it's still on HBO Max. So that's my recommended streaming service on where to view these episodes. Now, as far as this episode's reception is concerned, I'm not really sure how fans feel about this particular episode. Like I've said in previous reviews, the Scooby Doo Show is not talked about a lot. Only certain particular episodes are talked about a lot. So this one is not one of them. At least not that I've heard. I think it might be liked, or at least considered average, but I can't say for certain. So there's really only one way to find out whether this is a good, bad, or average episode. So let's take a look at the episode to see whether I think it is a good or bad episode of the Scooby Doo Show. The episode begins with Professor Von Clamp speaking to the press as the so-called time machine is loaded onto the SS Tahitian Star. As the time machine makes its way up, the construction worker knocks it into the side of the ship, briefly activating it, revealing a monster inside. When the crew notice what's inside, the professor says it's nothing. The gang head on a cruise to the South Seas after winning an all-expense-paid 3-week vacation in a contest. After boarding the ship, they meet Professor Von Clamp, who has built a time machine to demonstrate to a group of wealthy investors. At the demonstration, Von Clamp introduces the gang as his special guests, as well as his backer, Simon Grady. The professor begins to turn his time machine to the past. The machine malfunctions, however, and begins to proceed 5,000 years into the future. After a small explosion, a monster emerges from the machine and carries off the professor to somewhere on the ship. The gang begins to search the ship and look for clues, and Shaggy and Scooby are chased by the monster after the gang splits up. We get a really funny Shaggy and Scooby scene of them going to the South Sea Salon and pretending to be the salon workers. It's pretty funny. Probably my favorite scene of the entire episode. I love a good Shaggy Scooby comedic scene of them fooling the monster with disguises, and this was one of my favorite bits of that, my favorite interpretations of that. It's definitely my favorite bit in the episode. I like this part.
The South Sea Salon. Inside, quick. Welcome, sir. I'm the ship's recreation officer, and you are just in time for your Polynesian dancing lesson. Aha! A perfect fit. And away we go. Like you catch on very quickly, sir. How about a really neat faster beat? Uh-oh. Like class dismissed.
Meanwhile, Fred, Velma, and Daphne break into a locked room where they discovered a high-powered laser beam along with some strange disc. After meeting up with Shaggy and Scooby, the gang hides from the monster in the crew's quarters where they find Professor Von Clamp tied up. They devise a scheme to send the monster back into the time machine. After the machine is fixed, the investors hand the professor $500,000. While attempting to drag the monster back into the machine, the monster grabs the money and takes it with him. Velma discovers what's going on and decides to call her uncle to repair the time machine once again. I don't know if this is an actual uncle or not, but it is really cool that she does mention some sort of uncle. Though it is weird that Professor Von Clamp would even allow this. I don't know if he's just trying to save face in front of the investors to not look suspicious, but it's weird that he would even allow this occurrence to happen, even though he was denying it at first and said it was impossible to fix the machine. Why he allowed Velma to call her uncle and to fix the time machine is beyond me. And why he stayed is also beyond me, because he had the money. He could have just, him and Grady could have just left, but I don't know. So maybe the only explanation I could think of is that maybe they were just trying to save face with the investors and not look suspicious. But all they did was end up ruining their scheme by staying there. After receiving directions from her uncle, Velma fixes the time machine and the monster reappears. He runs off with the money while the professor and Simon Grady also try to escape. The gang follow and out that Von Clamp and Grady have the real money. The monster that reappeared after Velma fixed the time machine was Shaggy, who was carrying a fake briefcase. Which raises the question, where did this monster costume come from? How did Shaggy acquire this costume? Did the gang make a replica? Did they find one on the ship? And how did Shaggy slip into the time machine without the professor or Grady noticing while he was in the costume? It's definitely something to mention, at least. It's never really explained how Shaggy was able to slip into the time machine without the professor and Grady knowing if they were still there. But also where the hell he found this spare monster suit, because it wasn't Grady's. I mean, maybe it was, but for all I know, but the episode doesn't really explain where he got this extra costume from. So either it's a replica, he found another duplicate on a ship, which I don't know why, or he just found Grady's costume on the ship. I don't know. The gang trapped them and explained to the investors what was really going on. Professor Von Clamp and Simon Grady devised a fake time machine and monster to swindle the investors out of the money. The disc found by the gang were holographic images of the monster that could appear with the use of the laser beam. Which does explain how the monster was able to appear in the time machine twice. Once in the beginning of the episode when the press and the construction worker saw the monster while the time machine was being loaded on board. And when Scooby saw the monster later on when they first met Professor Von Clamp in his room. Other than that, though, there's no way that could have worked, as, every other instance it seemed to be a man in a costume. Though the episode seems to imply that this was used more than those 2 times, which if that's the case, then it completely doesn't make sense, because the scenes that we saw that weren't those 2 instances just don't back that up. So I personally believe that those discs were only used to scare Scooby that one instance, and before that to scare the press and the construction crew that was, or the loading dock crew, whatever they were, that was bringing the time machine on. Why? I have no clue. Maybe it was just a scare tactic to, make it seem real. But in every other instance, it looks like a man in a costume, so. The monster that grabbed the professor was Grady dressed up as the monster. After the monster mystery has been solved, the gang are seen sitting at a dining table with Shaggy making himself a sandwich and saying that no monster is going to scare him this time. But before he could take a bite of his sandwich, the monster appears growling at Shaggy. Shaggy is immediately freaked out by this and runs away as he leaves the sandwich behind. The monster then takes his face off, revealing Scooby Doo underneath. Scooby Doo then says his catchphrase and eats Shaggy's sandwich. And the episode ends with Scooby then chuckling to himself, thinking that he gave Shaggy a good scare. I'm going to give Season 2, Episode 7 of the Scooby Doo Show 2 stars out of 5. Yeah, this was a below average episode. It didn't resonate with me as much as I remember it being. Like, it had its moments to be sure, and it had its fair amount of positives. But overall, I felt this was a below average episode that didn't live up to what I remembered it being. So before I get into the negatives for the episode and what brings this episode down for me, I'll first get into the positives of the episode and what I actually did like about the episode. So starting with the positives, my first one is I think Fred and Velma both help fulfill the same basic role, which is they help piece together the clues to help solve the mystery and come up with the plan to basically, dupe Professor Von Clamp and Grady into revealing the location of the money and revealing their hand in the villain scheme, basically. So yeah, I don't think Fred was much of a leader in this episode like he normally is. There were moments, to be sure, but not as much as I really thought there was. More so, I feel like Fred and Velma just kind of were, would find stuff and then kind of piece everything together. And especially towards the end, like once the monster was supposedly captured and put back into the time machine and took the briefcase full of money, you could tell that Fred and Velma, the gears were turning in their heads and they were starting to realize that something was going on here. Because for a lot of the episode, the gang never really questioned much. But once it got to that point, Fred and Velma started to piece everything together that maybe everything isn't as it seemed, and maybe the professor isn't being as truthful as as innocent as he claims to be. So yeah, I felt Fred and Velma did help piece together the clues to help solve the mystery, but that's really all they did. They just fulfilled their basic roles, and I think the same thing about Velma. Like, Velma did fulfill her basic role. She wasn't really much of a leader or anything, but yeah, I feel like that was their strong suit. They helped piece together the clues to help solve the mystery and reveal the villain's scheme towards the halfway, a little over the halfway point of the episode. Then we have Shaggy and Scooby. Shaggy and Scooby were their usual funny, cowardly selves. They fulfilled their basic roles. I feel like the first half of the episode, Shaggy and Scooby fulfilled their basic roles of being their usual funny, cowardly selves. But I think the back half of the episode, Shaggy and Scooby helped deceive and capture the villains at the end. So Shaggy dressed up as the fake version of the monster, to reveal the villain's identity and the location of the money. And Scooby helped capture both Professor Von Clamp and Grady at the end when they realized they were caught and ran for the lifeboats, and Scooby switched the janitor's closet sign for the lifeboat with the lifeboat sign to fool them into running into the janitor's closet. So yeah, Shaggy and Scooby, I felt, there was two halves to it. The first half, they fulfilled their basic roles of being their usual funny, cowardly selves, and in the second half, they were quite helpful in capturing the villains. Shaggy helped deceive them, and Scooby helped capture them. Speaking of deception, next we have the villain outside of costume, Professor Von Clamp. Now, I know Professor Von Clamp wasn't actually the man in the costume, but he was still a part, one of the villains of the episode, so this is usually when there's a secondary villain that, even one that wasn't even in costume, I like to put them under the outside of costume element just to, give them the spotlight and talk about them. And I feel like Professor Von Clamp was a good character, mainly because he deceived everyone into believing that he could create this time machine that, could bring a monster from the future into the present. So, the fact that, the professor, for the most part in this episode, he seems like a good man as well. Like, he deceived everyone into believing he was this good person. Because we start out in the episode, and he looks like he's trying to prove a point. Like, he's the scientist who isn't believed. The press don't believe him. The investors are quite skeptical. And, he offers the gang, to his demonstration as a nice gesture, which, also adds to the deception, because he seemed like he was, he wanted to bring more eyes into the situation to help, make people believe that his time machine was actually real. And he also pretended to be a victim, which is actually really cool. I like when villains do that. But he pretended to be kidnapped by the monster, which was Grady in the costume. And, and basically, like, pretending to fix the time machine, and then Grady faking, in the costume, faking, going back into the time machine and then stealing the money. So, like, yeah, he played this really good deceptive game. It wasn't until the end where we saw his true colors once he was caught. So for the majority of the episode, I feel like, it was good because he kind of deceived everyone into believing that he was this good-hearted man who, was this scientist who wasn't believed and was trying to prove himself and correct and right, and trying to prove to the press and the gang and the investors that he really did build a time machine. So he's quite convincing in his deceiving role. But yeah, I thought he was pretty good outside of costume. I liked his character. Next, we have the motive of the episode, which I thought was good as well. So the motive of the episode, for Professor Von Clamp and Grady, was essentially that they wanted to scare and swindle the investors out of, out of their money. So this is actually a pretty good motive. Yeah, it's a money motive. But it's a unique money motive because I believe this is the first time in the Scooby Doo franchise that we've actually had a investor swindling motive. I don't think we've had that yet in the Scooby Doo series, in the Scooby Doo franchise. So this was a first, I believe. And if it has happened, it's been quite a while. But to my knowledge, I believe this is the first time we have villains that are trying to swindle investors out of their money, which is a pretty interesting and unique motive. So I do like the change up, and I feel like it's a fresh motive we hadn't seen yet. And I feel like it was a pretty creative and good motive, especially the way they executed their motive. I feel like Professor Von Clamp and Grady really did a good job of playing up their roles and deceiving everyone. And they almost got away with it, but, they just got caught by the gang being, a little bit too perceptive and catching on to their, deception. But yeah, overall, I like the motive. Yeah, it's a money motive, but it's a unique one, and it's something fresh, and we hadn't seen this in the franchise up to this point. So I do like, the unique nature of the money motive, that we get something new and fresh. And my final positive is that I found the setting of the episode to be good as well. So the main setting of the episode was, of course, the cruise ship, the SS Tahitian Star. So this was actually a pretty unique and fresh setting. Now, yeah, we've had a boat setting before. We technically had it in, Scooby-Doo Where's the Crew? And boats are nothing new in the franchise. They've been, temporary settings before. But we've actually not had a cruise ship as a setting of the episode. So that's at least something new and interesting. So yeah, we've had a boat type of setting, but not a huge big boat like a cruise ship. We've mainly had like regular old standard boats. Whereas I think this is the first time we've had a cruise ship as the main setting. And what I also liked about the setting was the secluded and isolated nature of the setting. The fact that you're basically stuck on this cruise ship for 3 weeks, as the gang say at the beginning of the episode. They have nowhere to go. They're basically trapped on the ship. There's only so many places they can go. There's a monster from the future on the loose. The professor's gone. It's just a whole bunch of chaos. So, yeah, it's like the secluded, isolated nature of the setting also works as well. The fact that you're just trapped on this cruise ship and there's really no way you can get off besides the lifeboats. But, again, like just, the isolated nature of it and the secluded nature of it really adds to the vibe of the episode. I really like, boat settings, when they're executed quite well. So yeah, I really like the SS Tahitian Star, the cruise ship, as the main setting of the episode. It was something unique and fresh, and I like the secluded and isolated nature of it. But that's all I got for positives. So I think it's about time to get on to the negatives of the episode and what I actually didn't like about the episode. So starting with the negatives for the episode, my first one is that I think Daphne was weak in this episode. Daphne didn't really do anything in this episode. She didn't really fulfill any sort of role. She didn't really help find any clues. She didn't really help piece together the clues to help solve the mystery like Fred and Velma. She wasn't funny and cowardly like Shaggy and Scooby. So I just wasn't, into Daphne's character in this episode. I don't feel they really did a good job with her. So yeah, once again, Daphne was pretty weak and pretty underutilized in this episode. Next up, we have the villain of the episode, who I thought was quite weak in all honesty. So the main villain of the episode is, of course, the futuristic monster, the 5,000-year-old monster from the future. And while the design is cool, I guess, it's kind of bug-like in nature. It's kind of furry and hairy. The futuristic monster, I don't find to be particularly scary or entertaining. I do like his design. I do like the furry, bug-like nature of the design. I think it's cool. But overall, I don't find anything about him scary. He doesn't really do anything particularly scary in my eyes, and he's not, there's nothing about his face or look that particularly creeps me out. But I didn't find him fun or entertaining. If he was in any entertaining scenes, it was because of Shaggy and Scooby. But I found really nothing entertaining or fun about the villain. So overall, like, the concept of a futuristic monster is a really neat idea. I just don't think they really explored it quite well or executed it quite well. Because, while the design is cool, I don't think they really gave him any sort of scare factor or any entertainment factor to him. Nothing really about him was particularly scary. He wasn't threatening in any way. And nothing was particularly entertaining about him. Like I said, if any entertainment came out of his scenes, it was mostly from Shaggy and Scooby and not from him. So yeah, while I like the design, I pretty much feel overall the villain of the episode was quite weak and just wasn't scary or entertaining in the slightest. Outside of costume, I found Grady to be an uninteresting character. So Grady's the other villain of the episode, and he's the one behind the mask. And to me, Grady was a very uninteresting character overall. He didn't really do anything. He didn't set up any exposition for the villain. He didn't really stand out in any way. I feel like Professor Von Clamp was a much more interesting character, whereas Grady just was... Yeah, he just didn't really work for me. He didn't have anything going for him outside of costumes. So yeah, he was a pretty boring character and uninteresting character outside of costume. There was a lack of suspects in the episode, so pretty much there's only one suspect in the episode, and that's Grady. You could argue Professor Von Clamp, however, I don't feel Professor Von Clamp counts as a suspect, because for the majority of the episode, he's not really portrayed as a suspect or suspicious character. He's portrayed as a victim, a friend of the gangs, a friendly character, a good man. There's nothing really, we're not really suspicious of him until towards the end, and I feel like that's not enough time for him to count as a suspect. So while it could be argued that he was a suspect, I personally don't count him as such. I feel Grady was the only one, and so yeah, they definitely needed more in the suspect department, and you think with a cruise ship like this, and with the bundle of investors, that all these investors could be great suspects. But they didn't really do that. So yeah, overall, the suspect department was very lacking, and we definitely needed more. And there really was no excuse, because we had a cruise ship as a setting, we had all these investors, so yeah, they definitely needed to build up the suspect count. There really wasn't much of a mystery in this episode. I didn't really see any sort of mystery in this episode. I'm not questioning anything about the monster or why he's on the ship, because we know why. It gets set up. We see the scene of him arriving. We know why. I'm not questioning why he's after the professor, because he threatened Shaggy and Scooby later on about taking them 5,000 years into the future. So predictably, he wants to take them, but take the professor back to his time, or maybe he just wants the professor to, bring him back to, is enraged that the professor, took him out of his time, and he's trying to, hold him captive to make him send him back to his time. But yeah, I wasn't really questioning anything about, the episode. I wasn't really seeing any sort of mystery. It was more so like an adventure, like, kind of like an event, like the gang were invited to something strange happens, it's kind of like the Captain Color episode. They see something strange, and especially when someone presumably gets kidnapped, then the gang are being good Samaritans and trying to find that person and then get the monster back into the time machine. So, like, for the majority of it, at least for the first half of the episode, they portray it as something, that's actually real, like a real monster from the future. And it's only until, the back half where, Fred and Velma start to be suspicious of it. But yeah, I didn't really see any mystery in this episode. I wasn't questioning anything. So yeah, overall, there was really no mystery to be found here in this episode. It was really just, kind of a mix of an adventure and, the gang witnessing something strange and just being good Samaritans and helping out the professor because they believed him to be kidnapped and, they saw him as a good man and were just trying to be good Samaritans. I found the clues of the episode to be weak as well. So you really only have 2 clues in this episode, and that was really the holographic images and the laser beam. And all this really does is explain how the monster was in the time machine in 2 instances. The first instance, like I said in the review section, when the time machine hit the side of the ship, and the loading dock worker and one of the press members, sees the monster in the time machine. And then when Scooby sees it later on in the professor's room, when he's examining the time machine. But that's really it. Like, it just explains those 2 moments. It doesn't really go into, it doesn't narrow down the list of suspects, and it doesn't really point towards the swindling motive. So yeah, overall, I don't feel the clues really serve their purpose. All they really did is explain, like, 2 instances where it would have been out of place for Grady to be out of place for Grady to be in the costume. But other than that, it's weak, and the clues could have been a lot stronger. And my final negative is I found the atmosphere of the episode to be quite non-existent, in all honesty. So I really felt no tension or suspense or creepiness or eeriness in this episode. I wasn't fearing for the gang's safety, wasn't on the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next. Didn't find anything creepy or eerie about the villain or the setting. So yeah, there was no atmosphere to speak of. They tried with the dark, night and secluded, isolated nature of the setting. And while it helped a little bit, it just did not elevate it to a point where I felt any sort of atmosphere in the episode. So yeah, to me, there really wasn't any atmosphere to speak of, and it was completely non-existent. And there were sprinklings of it. They tried, but they didn't really get to that point. They didn't really earn it. There was no moments where I was fearing the gang's safety, on the edge of my seat, wondering what's going to happen next, or find anything in the villains or the setting to be creepy or eerie. Overall, guys, I would personally not recommend this episode to fans and newcomers to the show. It's a very disappointing below-average episode that really just didn't held up as well as I thought it did. And it's just a very disappointing episode. It has its positives, don't get me wrong, and there was stuff in it. But for the most part, it definitely dropped the ball and wasn't as amazing as I remember it being. So, yeah, very disappointing below-average episode. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the review. Please give it a like if you did. Comment down below your thoughts on the episode. Do you like this episode? Do you think I'm being too harsh on it? Are there things that you see that I don't see? Do you hate this episode? I'd be interested in that as well. Do you find this to not be a great episode like me? Do you find this to be a disappointing below average episode or maybe really bad? Or are you somewhere in the middle where you think it's average, it's decent, and it's okay, but it's not good or bad? I'm curious for your thoughts, so let me know. And subscribe for more Scooby Doo content like this, or if you're just interested in any of my other content, obviously I have more Scooby Doo reviews on the way as part of my summer special, Scooby Month, Halloween special, but also, regular, months as well. This is a Scooby-focused channel. We cover all things ranging from the TV show episodes, the movies, the video games, the books, you name it. We're covering all things Scooby-Doo on this channel. So if you're a diehard Scooby-Doo fan like me and love all things Scooby-Doo, come join the channel, experience some amazing Scooby-Doo content. Let's have fun. Let's talk about, our favorite Mystery Inc. gang and, their fun adventures and their fun mysteries. In my next video, I'll continue my reviews of the Scooby Doo Show with a review of Season 2, Episode 8 of the Scooby Doo Show, titled The Creepy Heat from the Deep, the final episode of Season 2. Yep, we've made it, guys, to the last episode of Season 2. This is definitely going to be fun and interesting. I remember enjoying The Creepy Heat from the Deep, and I remember actually liking it. It's definitely a fondly remember episode because the villain is definitely referenced a lot. So here's to hoping that this will be a great Season 2 finale, and we'll end Season 2 on a high note going into Season 3. But yeah, we're one episode away from finishing Season 2, and then we're off to Season 3 of the Scooby Doo Show. So yeah, if you want to know my thoughts on the Season 2 finale of the Scooby Doo Show, Season 2, Episode 8, The Creepy Heat from the Deep, then come join me next time. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, peace out.
Got it all together for a brand new show. Scooby Doo is here again, away we go.
Scooby Doo is running from a spooky ghost.
Shaggy is a doing what he does the most. Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo.
Hey, come on, get involved till the mystery is solved.
Hang around for Scooby Doo. That's my pal. Scooby Dooby Doo.